Hello, this is Domenico again with Easynomics, and we're going to look at allocative efficiency as applied to an input graph, specifically a labor market graph. And we want to highlight this concept of over and under allocation and how the market gravitates towards what is allocatively efficient. So I want to emphasize, and we're going to see this graph later in the course when we get into government intervention and price controls, but might as well be introduced to it now. Most of the graphs that we use in micro for the IB are output graphs, but on occasion we'll need to use an input graph. So this is an input graph. The input specifically is labor. And it is the household that is the producer or the supplier. The household is supplying key inputs like land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and the input in this graph is labor. Then we're going to look at the firm, and the firm in this case, in an input market, is the demand. They are demanding resources to produce a particular good or service. So they're demanding the input, in this case, labor. So let's keep that in mind. So we're going to have our supply of labor by the household. It's upward sloping. Supply equals our marginal costs. And to acquire increased labor skills, that requires increased cost because you might have to go to school to acquire those skills. And so there is a cost incurred with higher skill sets for labor. And then we have the demand by firms for labor, sloping downward. Demand equals to our marginal benefit. Okay, so we have supply and demand, and on the x-axis we're measuring quantity, on the y-axis we're measuring wage, not price, because labor is priced as a wage or valued as a wage. What happens when wage is too low? So let's create a hypothetical situation where wage is below what the free market equilibrium should be. So we'll call this wage 1. And at low wage, we see that there's a significant increase in the quantity demanded by firms. Firms are seeing that low wage and they want to take advantage of that low wage. So there's a significant increase in the quantity of demand at this particular point. I'll call that point B. And the quantity demanded is right here at Q2. I'm just going to call it Q2 for now. So excessive quantity of demand by firms because the wage for labor is so low. But households are not willing to supply their labor at that low wage. So households are supplying their labor up to that wage, and that creates the quantity being supplied. So here is Q1 at point A. And at Q1, that is the quantity being supplied by households versus the quantity being demanded by firms. And we see that the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, which means that we have excess demand. Essentially, right, firms are facing a shortage. Okay, excess demand is a shortage. There is a shortage of labor. Firms really want to employ, but households really not willing to supply. Okay. Now, in terms of allocative efficiency, we want to pay attention to the quantity being supplied. Whenever you want to see if the market's allocatively efficient, look at the quantity supplied at a particular wage or price. So at wage 1, the quantity supplied is at QS. So we're going to create another line from QS upwards to here. Okay, now highlight this point. So here we're touching the marginal benefit. So here, marginal benefit is greater than the supply curve here, the marginal cost. So whenever MB, right, we'll make a note at, actually, let me give myself a little bit more room to write. So at quantity supplied, or at Q1, we notice that the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. So that's what we call an under allocation of resources versus what is desired by society. Under allocation will usually tie in with excess demand or a shortage. So we see a shortage because quantity demand is greater than quantity supplied. And at QS or Q1, we see that the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. So that's going to create what we call a welfare loss. Let's go ahead and highlight that area here. Welfare loss is this triangle right here. Okay, that is this area here is what we call a welfare loss. All right, society has lost the opportunity to employ these labor resources to produce the quantity of goods and services that are desired by society. So whenever we have a situation where MB is greater than MC, a welfare loss will be generated. And this is not what we want in economics. So something has to change. And that change is going to be an increase in the wage. I'll leave that. Okay. So let's just get rid of this and illustrate what's going to happen as a result of the shortage and the under allocation. I'm going to do my best here. Okay. So whenever there's a shortage, we know that that puts upward pressure, in this case, on the wage. So the wage is going to start to rise. And it's going to rise to this particular point. So we're going from AB to point C. And at point C, we will reach a free market equilibrium that's allocatively efficient. So we'll call that Q3, and we'll call this wage 2. So the wage will rise to W2, and as the wage rises, households will increase their quantity supplied of labor up to that higher wage. And as the wage rises, firms will decrease their quantity of demand for labor until we get to point C. So the shortage has been cleared. At C, we're operating at Q3, where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. And at point C, we're going to remember supply equals demand, and also marginal cost equals marginal benefit, and it is allocatively efficient. So the underallocation has been resolved as a result of the quantity demand by firms decreasing, the quantity supplied by firms increasing until we reach an allocatively efficient outcome at point C. Okay? So let's go ahead and analyze this as we would on a paper exam. As can be seen, we have a graph A, illustrating a labor market, which is an input market. On the x-axis, we're measuring quantity. On the y-axis, we're measuring the wage of labor. We have an upward sloping supply of labor, labeled S1, which is equal to our marginal cost. We must remember that households are supplying this key input of labor. Demand curve is downward sloping according to the law of demand, where it is labeled D1 equal to the marginal benefit. Firms are demanding this resource. And we are starting off with a wage of W1. At wage W1, the quantity demanded by firms at point B is set at Q2, but the quantity supplied by households is set at point A or at Q1. We'll notice that at a wage of W1, Q2 is greater than Q1, or quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. Thus, we have excess demand Thus, firms are facing a shortage. The shortage puts upward pressure on the wage from W1 to W2, and as a result, the quantity demanded by firms decreases from point B to C, or from Q2 to Q3, while the quantity supplied by households increases from Q1 to Q3, or from point A to point C. At point C, S1 equals D1, which provides a equilibrium free market wage at W2 with an equilibrium quantity at Q3. We will remember that at Q3, quantity supplied is equal to the quantity demanded, and also at Q3, the marginal cost is equal to the marginal benefit, which is allocatively efficient. Now, we should also note that at the lower wage of W1, quantity supplied is at Q1, and at Q1, the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. Thus, there's an underallocation of labor resources. There's a welfare loss that's generated, which results in the upward pressure on the wage, the increase in the quantity supplied by households, the decrease in the quantity demand by firms, until we reach the allocatively efficient outcome at point C, where MC equals MB. Okay? So that is that analysis. The next video will look at scenario 2, when wage is set above the equilibrium wage, and then what happens. That's an overallocation. And then we'll have another 2 videos looking at an output market, illustrating essentially the same concept. And that's it. Don't forget to subscribe and like. If you have any questions, just feel free to comment. Thank you so much.